Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily this lovely Monday morning. I'm Chamberlain also.
Indeed, good morning and welcome to the program. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, yes, it is. It is a lovely weather here in Abuja. 27 degrees centigrade. Humidity also very lovely. And it's also getting a lot more chill. That's a lot of people probably will like it. So, who knows, it might get colder as we just get into this Matan season. It comes with the dusty winds, but so far, I tell you, it is lovely. Just as perhaps this site, you might also see 3-arm zone, we call it here in Abuja, because it contains the 3 arms of government, the headquarters of the 3 arms of government, so judiciary, National Assembly, and the executive. So if you're going to navigate your way around here, you have to watch it.
Indeed, Chamberlain, you can still see that there's plenty of green around this area. Some of it, I'm sure, will be reserved for the greenness, just to make sure that we're able to manage our carbon footprint. But I think that, it also still tells you that there's still development coming to this 3-arm zone. I'm not very clear. Maybe I shouldn't say this. In fact, I'm not going to say it. But I can tell you that if you do not have a journalistic tag, do not try or attempt, to fly a drone around that particular area. You might not like the results you get. But it is quite a thing to admire from the skies, Chamberlain. Even on the ground, when you visit that particular area, the 3-arm zone, you cannot but notice the very imposing rock that is right behind it. Where the Aso Villa derives its name from. So, yes, these are the beautiful shots we're giving you this morning, all the way showing you even up to Eagle Square. You're also seeing the centenary, it's in the centenary now, the cenotaph, beg your pardon, the cenotaph, right up to Eagle Square. Yeah, that arc you can see right there, that's the cenotaph. That's where in a few months from now, sometime January 18, there's going to be a parade around there. You can also see the Eagle Square that hosts all of the ceremonies, all the very important ceremonies we have in this country right there in that square, the parking lot. But yes, that's the general picture of the 3-arm zone. It's come into contention in recent times. People wanted to do protests in Eagle Square. And I say, no, you're too close for comfort. Why don't you use the stadium instead? But somehow we still saw that, spilling somewhat to the Eagle Square area. But that's the beautiful shots we're waking up with. Don't let the fine weather, the fine morning weather of Abuja deceive you. Yes, it's lovely night into the morning, but by afternoon you'll be wondering, where did all the coolness go? When the sun bears its fangs, sometimes when the sun shines brightly, it does feel like the sun is bearing. Sun, no one is competing with you. You are the only one. Why shine so brightly?
Speaking about the weather, a lot is also changing across the country. Up north, for instance, so the farming season too. Several people saying bags of probably beans and things like that beginning to crash to half of the price because it's harvest season. So in Damaturu, for instance, those who usually get it for about 230,000 per bag, you could see it for 130. In some places, they expect it to go lower than 130. So if you could strike that bargain a lot more, 80,000 per bag probably. So, but how you then buy and store for, I think they're already looking towards Ramadan to ensure that you could stock a lot before that time. So all of those things happening, so which speaks to a lot. Harvest season, and then its impact on price. They expect it to happen to other things.
But we do hope that we'll be able to feel the impact in price, because generally don't forget that Christmas is also right about the corner, and usually about this season where other people see prices crashing for promos, you see our own prices rising because people know that you must buy. But people have since learn to be wise. The only thing is if people will be liquid enough to be able to buy now that it is a bit cheap.
That's key.
To be able to store for the times when, it might be a bit more expensive as a result of scarcity. But I think ultimately what we need to work on is farming year round. all the federal government initiatives, even state governments, you know, because we know that there's wet season farming, there's dry season farming. I know for a number of states now, after they finish the harvest, they'll be looking to go into dry season farming. Jigawa State is one of those states that has been able to show what it's capable of in that regard. So it's been able to ensure that this produce are available the year round. People should not be waiting. We have very fertile land. Our land is, you know, willing to be farmed any time of the year as long as you give it sufficient water. And there is sunshine. Never mind that the sun, the sun can shine really, really well in the dry season. But generally, I don't think anyone is complaining. I mean, the soil will not be complaining if you can give it what it needs to be able to produce those crops.
You know, speaking about complaints, a gentleman complained over the weekend in Abuja. They call it Abuja Gist platform. So he did go there and post that he said some men, 5 of them, he says they were clad in police uniform, all armed, caught up with his younger brother, who is 21. They tried, according to the story which he posted on X, tried to extort him for 200,000 naira, thereabouts, accusing him of being a, quote, Yahoo boy, which he said his brother was not. So his brother, sensing danger, him in the midst of 5 armed men, tried to make a dash, escape. So he tried it. While he was running away, they shot at him. And it says, the images you then see, they left him for dead. But thankfully, he said the bullet missed him and left him with broken leg, after which they rushed him to the hospital. So he said his leg was completely broken. And then he was bleeding, but he's at the hospital now fighting for his life. And then there are the images. And then there were also, that's one of those images you see there. So a number of questions. But upon this, the FCT Police Command also much later issued a statement which was signed by Josephine Ade, the police public relations officer, which I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It says the attention of the FCT Police Command has been drawn to an incident involving Mr. David Ikechukwu, who was reportedly shot by yet to be identified gunmen, allegedly operating from a tricycle and wearing blue and black uniforms on November 9, 2024. The Commissioner of Police for the FCT Command, CP Olatunji Rilwan Disu PSC, has ordered a comprehensive investigation to apprehend those responsible and to uncover the circumstances surrounding this unfortunate event. The FCT Police Command assures the public that a dedicated team of detectives is actively investigating all aspects of the case. This investigation aims to provide clarity. It goes on and on. So that is what is going on at the moment. But I must also say that, yes, much as there are questions about all of this, but myself, only recently, while I was coming back from the sports center at about almost 11 thereabout, though, a group of policemen in Area 1 under the bridge there, they were doing their regular checks. So as we're all driving, I was spotted. Of course, I was clad in my T-shirt and sports gear. The chap that said, hey, park. So at the end of the day, he was drunk and he was armed and right there under the bridge. So I thought, what's going on? So he was asking for behaving funny. So eventually I had to move to whoever was in command, I think the DPO right there, who then said, what's the issue here? And so the chap, I wasn't surprised. He said, I refuse to let him check. The DPO was there. He saw me when I opened the boot for him to check. He said, look, he just checked the car. I said, please go. So the conduct of policemen, bottom line is this. Yes, people need to be cautious out there. They say they're investigating this. We'll look to see what happens. And then, of course, we hope they're not going to round up people on the roads and bring them because somebody shot him. Who were those? So the bullet, I think it's pretty easy for investigation. Who were those that shot? So the bullet that they give to police usually is marked and numbered. So from that bullet, it should be easy tracing for us to know. But many people are not putting this beyond the police. But the fact that they were operating in a tricycle, many thought, okay, does that happen here in Abuja? But we know in Lagos, they do operate in Danfo and all sorts of stuff. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, looking at the pictures, it's very, very difficult not to feel, not to feel empathy for that young man, who has been shot. It's not clear now who has done the shooting. The allegation is that they were police officers.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable that, he saw police and he did not have the confidence to be able to, stay around them. His first instinct was to run. It's unclear why that was. I mean, of course, the reputation of the police still needs a lot of improvement, in that regard. But I really do feel very sorry for the young man. I can't imagine what it is that he must be going through and what his family too will be going through right now, just watching him lying down in pain. I'm also quite, it's encouraging that the police itself have seen this and they have responded as they ought to. I also am a little sad that when issues like this come up, the first place of complaints we go to is not the police itself, because there is actually a complaint response unit, and the police has been investing quite a bit, and not just the police, there are a number of other international organizations, well-meaning international organizations, who have been investing in the complaint response unit of the police to see it up and running and doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm still a little sad that a lot of people are still not utilizing that. Their first point of call is not to complain to the complaint response unit of the police. I guess because it's also still associated with the police. Perhaps there might need to be some rethinking around complaints that the police, that will be against the police. Maybe there needs to be an independent ombudsman. It could be people by former police officers. I'm not clear what exactly, but we need to rethink why it is this kinds of instances, when it is that there is a problem, why people still do not feel confident enough to report, to people who ideally should deal with this kind of issues. That is assuming these men here were police officers, because that's the allegation. However, it is a good thing to see that the police has noted this particular incident and they said they're investigating. The only major problem I have with this is that there is no time frame to this investigation. Ideally, there ought to be a time frame so that this can be addressed in good time. People know when to. It cannot be an investigation that goes on endlessly. If there is a time frame that this must be addressed in, then people have more confidence. People know that you're actually doing business. This is not just because, how many committees have been set up? People already, it's almost a standard reply whenever it is that a statement is given. Oh, we set up something to look into it. Our men will look into it. The question is, how long will it take? So I would have, expected a realistic time frame within which, even if they're not able to crack the case, assuming they're not able to pin down, we will expect an update by that time. This is leaving it endlessly, but this young man deserves justice. He deserves, to know that he is safe within his country. Because if he was running away from police officers, I bet you he's been traumatized at some point in his life by the police. And as such, maybe he just didn't want to take any risk. Maybe it was run away and then we can figure out what it was that was chasing us later. And I think that particular narrative needs to change. How it is that we're going to change it, because it's a job for all of us. It's not just for the police. I still get frightened when I'm approaching a police checkpoint. I put on my... way before I get to a police checkpoint, I have since put on my light so that nobody says, we did not see, we did not know. I do that. So that's just how it is. So I think that we need to work on that as a country. These are not things that we need to dismiss. It is the reality. We cannot trivialize it. You just mentioned that somebody was drunk.
Yeah, he was drunk.
How will an officer be, consuming alcohol when he or she knows that they have to be on duty? So there are big questions around how it is that, our officers and men still operate. While, yes, we know that there are those who are doing a good job, we also know that there are still lots of bad eggs within the force. And these kinds of people are the ones that, raise trust issues. As we said, the police say they're looking into this, but we need a time frame to know when it is that we can expect updates and how quickly this case is going to get resolved. But in the meantime, our hearts with this young man, Mr. David Ikechukwu, who is currently in the hospital, and we really sincerely hope that he's able to get the treatment he deserves and is able to get back on his feet, literally speaking, very soon.
Yeah, so how that gentleman, the police, was drunk and armed, he just asked, he lives
and his boss was aware. Because you just meant the DPO was there.
DPO was in the Highlander in Mufti. It was there on the other side. And so you just wonder, do they even check all of these men who are there at that time of the night? How? So it's a lot that really people need to be cautious about. All right, let's take you through some of the dailies this morning. Go ahead and have a look. Here are some of the dailies this morning, and we're going to start off with Vanguard newspaper today. Petrol, banks loan for imports to hit 3.5 trillion naira. That's the big lead on the front page of Vanguard newspaper here this morning. Well, The Guardian equally focuses on something economy related, and their version reads, delayed 2025 to 2027 MTEF threatens budget cycle. So you may wonder, so how do they proceed with that one here today? And then have a look at Nigerian Tribune. Presidency gets hard on Atiku, says he is envious of Tinubu's position. And the Daily Times on the same theme, presidency, Atiku envious of Tinubu's position, misunderstands Nigeria's current realities, says ex-VP has shown more interest in undermining president than in addressing his party's internal crisis. Daily Times reports this morning. Well, Daily Trust takes on a different narrative. Cement hits 8,800 naira as cost of building materials skyrockets. Iron rod jumps from 800,000 naira to 1.6 million naira in 1 year. Situation dashing our hope of owning houses, ascribed to citizens. Experts blame naira depreciation, transportation costs. Blueprint newspaper this morning focuses on terrorism in Northwest, and the lead story reads, ACF tasks FG on Lakurawa onslaught recruitment drive. Nigerian News Direct, governors endangering perception of judiciary by giving cars, houses to judges. Sarah tells Tinubu AGF. Well, Leadership newspaper also talking about security. Wipe out Lakurawa now. Northern leaders tell military. Say terrorists sacking security agents, local vigilantes. Troops pound bandits in Kebbi, Zamfara. The Abuja Inquirer, presidency Atiku envious of Tinubu after 6 failed attempts. This Nigeria, incessant national grid collapse. Stakeholders lament dwindling business fortunes. Call for complete overhaul of power sector. Or Business Day picks up on this narrative. CAC registration delays frustrate Nigeria's businesses. Business registration takes weeks, months, say lawyers. CAC denies, says registration still takes 24 hours. Well. Well, look at Data Independence this morning. Trump's win may weaken Naira, raise debt service costs, PMS prize. Those are the dailies this morning.
NEC today took a presentation from the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Their main focus is fair taxation, responsible borrowing, and sustainable spending. The council acknowledged that the country is underperforming on all indices as it regards yields from major revenue sources, also our tax to GDP ratio, and so on. So after extensive deliberation, NEC noted the need for sufficient alignment between and amongst the stakeholders for the proposed reforms. So Council therefore recommend the need to withdraw the bill currently before the National Assembly on tax reforms, so that we can have wider consultations and also build consensus around these reforms for the benefit of the entire country.
All right, so there you go. A lot has since happened ever since then, but as we also did notice here, some of the key elements of the 2024 tax bill that was sent to the National Assembly, 4 components of that. So you see that the Nigeria Tax Bill, Nigeria Tax Administration Bill, Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill, and then the Joint Revenue Establishment Bill. So all of those make up that bill that was sent to the National Assembly.
There are 4 bills in all.
Yeah. So, and then the thing about all of that, yes, there's been a lot of controversy, of which much as the Northern governors and NEC did recommend that be withdrawn. The president responded and said, look, the bill is before the National Assembly, so you can make an input. You could go to public hearing if you feel strongly about it. And then it still rages, different response from different quarters. So this morning, we're joined by Senator Ibrahim Shekarau, former governor of Kano State, former minister of education and chairman, League of Northern Democrats. My apologies. League of Northern Democrats. I can't forget that. Good morning and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. How are you? It's a pleasure meeting you.
Yes.
Good morning, my sister. How are you doing?
Good morning, Your Excellency. So, it's good to see you again.
Just a quick follow-up. The last time you came, thereafter you proceeded to Ogun State for consultation and several other places. Yeah. We heard his recommendations, how he thought that make it broad-based if you really want to fix this country. But if you make it the regional base, it appears it's going to communicate a different narrative, which may be misinterpreted. Yeah. How is the League responding to that?
Well, I think, thank you very much once again. The visit to our leaders, of course, one of them, as you very well referred to, was former President Olusegun Obasanjo. He welcomed the idea after listening to us, after listening to our argument, our objectives, our focus. He commended our effort, but as a nationalistic person, he said, look, this problem is not limited to the North alone. Why can't you broaden your contacts and reach out to your colleagues up in the other part of the country and come up with a National League of Democrats? And that was a very wonderful suggestion. We came back and that is already on the table before the leadership of the League and is being considered. And we've already started reaching out to some few names, and we are registering the same understanding, and we are receiving the cooperation, and they applauded it. Very soon, we will come up with what he suggested. And he in fact went further to say that any day you come up with a national League of Democrats, come back, I will be the grand patron, because he said anything to break up this country, he will use his last blood to defend it. He is a Nigerian, he is proud to be a citizen of Nigeria, and he is not prepared. And a number of them that we reached out to express the same thing. So I think this will soon be on board. We assured him the fact that we call it League of Northern Democrats, that did not mean we are only concerned with the North. We just felt, people say charity begins at home. We wanted to look inwards and see what our problems are and probably share it with colleagues all over the Federation. So it's already on. We are on to that. We accepted the challenge. We accepted his counseling, and we are on to that. By the grace of God, we'll get to that.
There are several people who are frustrated with the status quo, and they feel that a lot needs to change across board. So how do you think it's possible to get people, quote, of like minds into this national league, and then they pull together with the same ethos and ideology and really make an impact without all of these fault lines somehow finding its way and derailing the objectives?
Well, Chamberlain, we are very aware of the fact, and we are conscious of the fact that it's not going to be an easy journey. It's not going to be a matter of tomorrow, 1 year, 2 years. I mentioned the other time I came here. It's not going to be easy. And like any other thing, when you come up with such a very strong position, those whose food will be punctured, so to say, will definitely want to fight back. Just as we say that corruption is fighting back when you attempt to fight corruption, those who are out to be corrupt will always want to fight back. So in the same vein, we expect that, but we're not going to be deterred, we are not going to be discouraged, and we are very, very optimistic that Nigeria has very, very many hundreds of thousands of concerned, capable, reasonable people that will listen to this. You see, all it takes is try to identify the right people. They're there. You know, most people feel a little bit timid to come out and say, here I am. But when you fish them out and encourage them to participate, I always, against the risk of immodesty, I always cite myself as an example. All my life in the public service as a bureaucrat, as a civil servant, I never dreamt of picking party politics. But when people realized that we have something to offer, they started calling, agitating. In fact, it started from my former students. They formed an association. They said, look, you can't just retire and go without, we've seen what you've given us in the system, we see the commitment and so on. That's how it started. And they kept pressurizing. I mentioned it maybe the other time, I've mentioned in many places. The person who broke the camel's back was the late Damasan in Kano. He once sent for me. He said, Ibrahim, why are you dragging your feet when people are asking you to come and serve the society? I said, sir, I haven't the money. Today in Nigeria, if you want to contest election, even if it is councillor, he said, shut up. If you have people, you have wealth. Go and answer them. That's how it started. I voluntarily retired after serving for about 26 years, rising through the ranks from the classroom teacher up to permanent secretary. So I think it's doable. I will be the last person to believe that we will not succeed. There are a lot of people like that out, and we will agitate. All we are doing now, first of all, is to advocate, do a lot of advocacy, do a lot of public enlightenment, let Nigerians know that you have no moral right to complain. All this hardship, difficulty, lack of economic power to get the 3 meals on the table, and so you haven't the moral right to complain if you do not come up to participate. Participating meaning one, get properly registered. Mm-hmm. On the day of election, come out to elect. The other time I came here, I drew our attention to the fact that we have 93 million registered voters, and I think they are all living. It's not fake. But since 1999 to date, we have never registered up to 40 million people coming out to vote. Why is 50 million? They're all there. So we need to mobilize them to come out if the number is all out. And we advocate for the right people. And again, the parties as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the issues which we'd like to get your attention on about is also this tax bill. I mean, Magwell interviewed the taxman himself on hard copy, which of course you get perspectives on that one.
Yeah.
So could you tell us then, because it came across, or still does come across to a number of people, when they heard the northern governors kicking against it, after which NEC made their recommendations, of which the presidency responded. They think that the northern leaders are opposed to this, even though perhaps it might be tantamount to painting the whole region with one brush, because there are other people who in the same region have thought otherwise, saying, nope, we need to have a look at some of these things. What is your impression, or the League's impression, if I may, on that matter?
I think our impression is that, you see, democracy is about engagement, is about carrying the people. Politics is about people. I'm very surprised that in spite of the position of the National Economic Council, the president is still insisting, let it go to the National Assembly. If I were him, I would invite them. I haven't the details of word by word of the bill, but the general impression created, interpretation by experts, is about particularly the issue of the VAT. See, VAT is about a tax on consumers. And when you talk of consumers, they are all over the place, all over the Federation. And the argument has been, if you are saying all those paying the VAT, and the VAT being collated by the headquarters of the various agencies, companies, industries, which are not spread all over the Federation, then that means you are denying the benefit of the tax out of the VAT from consumer that is far away from the center of the collection of the VAT taxes. So this is the basic argument. And I think, unfortunately, initially when the northern governors met and made their position, it may sound too regional, too sentimental, and I probably did not want to see it that way. Fortunately for them, the vice president, who is the constitutional chairman of the National Economic Council, called a meeting. And it was a unanimous decision of all the 36 governors at that place. I still wonder, because the National Economic Council is not advisory.
Pardon me to jump in,
it's constitutional.
But for you, because you are in a unique position, now your response is going to be important in terms of whether how others to see this. You've been a governor, so decision making is not new or strange to you.
Absolutely.
You've been a lawmaker, so you also understand processes of bills and how all of those things work. You've been a minister of education, who should be understanding certain things. So should your default mode be that of, well, on a political angle, or you should say, okay, wait a minute, chances are that people could be political about this and not actually understand what is the devil is in the detail.
No, you see, make a reference to my time as a governor or minister. When I was governor for 8 years, there was no time I sent any bill to the State Assembly without discussing it out of the chambers. First of all, we tried to engage the stakeholders. I established a 50 wise men consultative forum for 8 years, and it's a collection of different categories of people. Any policy, any program, especially bills that will turn out to be laws, before we send it to the State Assembly, we discuss at the stakeholders meeting. Then I invite, first of all, the relevant committee from the State Assembly. We discuss it. Then in the end, I always invite the State Assembly, the 40 of them. We meet every month. At the end of every month, I meet all the 40 of them, including the opposition, the 12 PDP members of the State Assembly. We always discuss out of the chamber. So by the time my bill goes to the State Assembly, it's virtually understood by all members of the State Assembly. And that is exactly what I expect to be replicated at the center. Mr. President should cultivate this. In fact, it was so sad. For the 4 years I was in the Senate, I advocated this. I was asking questions. I asked the President of the Senate, when do the members meet Mr. President? In fact, I was so worried that I will tell you that I met the then Chief of Staff. I made a proposal. I said, please advise Mr. President. We are partners in progress in making this nation to move forward. The division of legislature and executive does not mean we are apart. It's just between like the wife and the husband, if they don't cooperate. And as such, my feeling is that the takeoff point by Mr. President was wrong. I expected him to have consulted widely. I expected him to have reached out to the governors because they are major stakeholders. And if that had been done, all this exposure of some governors or even the National Economic Council objecting to it, and you still say let it go to the National Assembly and there will be public hearing. And so this is, as far as I'm concerned, is grandstanding. And I think it doesn't speak well of the procedure of making the laws. There should be some consultations. That's my feeling.
Some people will say, you know, first and foremost, I had, as my colleague did say, I had an engagement, an interview with the chairman of the Presidential Tax Reform Committee, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, on Friday night. And I would highly recommend that interview to you. I think you should listen to it. As I will to all of our viewers, you know, who are, you know, listening to us right now. It's a shame that we're not able to play some of the tracks there.
That's right.
And very pointed questions were asked. From what we could deduce, because I also haven't read the bills. There are 4 of them before the National Assembly, and he did admit that a lot of them are bulky. But he says that he believes that this stance of the northern governors and even that of NEC has come up from a place of distrust, not because anybody has read that bill. Because, as a matter of fact, he says that all of the governors or all of the states actually stand at an advantage with the new proposition that, you know, they are proposing with VAT. I mean, he's somebody who is very experienced in the tax world, and even before now, he had recommended that it should be a consumption tax. States where these consumptions are made should be rewarded for the economic activities that take place in their state. And he says that's precisely what this reform does. So he says that there are 2 difficult places where, you know, they thought they were going to have problems. One was with Lagos State, which currently gets a little additional benefit as a result of the way it is currently shared, derivation, because of the fact the headquarter effect, which the governors have made reference to. And the second is the proposition to the federal government that they should take 10% instead of the 15% out of which is what they normally get, to make sure that all the states get what they would normally, they don't get less than what they would have gotten on a normal day as a result of this, but that there is an encouragement for them to take more, you know, to be more intentional about the economic activity that goes on within their own states. He said it was at the NEC meeting on that particular day, and that there was engagement. So do you think, when I asked him, you know, how this could have come up, he says what he believes is that because there are 4 different bills, what he believes is that somebody must have picked up one bill, saw something somewhere, and did not read the rest of it, and just went to town, you know, with that particular suspicion, and that is basically what they now have to deal with. But that anyone who reads the bills will be wondering, where is this conflict coming from?
Well, I think, much as I appreciate this, it's good the chairman of the Tax Reform Committee came on board. I'm surprised that if he was at the NEC meeting, and still the NEC came up with a position that this bill be withdrawn, and the president is insistent, and that's very reckless. I mean, it's one of 2 things. Either he did not make his case very clear to the NEC meeting, or the NEC understood him, but they still said, let's advise the president to put on hold and let us understand all of this. So I think the problem now is not necessarily the content of the bill, the procedure. You see, in democracy, you must be seen to carry the people along. And I'm sure in the interest of the president himself, it's one thing to have the technical explanation that probably they were not misunderstood, and the states are probably going to benefit more from all this and so on, and they single out one out of the 4 bills. It is the duty of Mr. President to listen to his immediate advisors are the governors. And it seems he's not carrying them along.
No, but that's interesting, because the governors are different also from the National Assembly. Members of the National Assembly, interestingly, 2 weeks ago, I also got to speak with a member of the National Assembly, who, interestingly, is in opposition. And I asked him, at that time NEC had made the recommendation, and I asked him, if he thought NEC should withdraw. And, I mean, if he thought the president should withdraw, and he said no. Because he says the governors have stakes in the National Assembly, and if they feel very strongly about it, their influence on their members should be strong enough to be able to quash this.
No, I think that shouldn't be the way it should be, because it's not going to be in the interest of our democracy and respect of the rule of law and respect for the presidency as well. If, for example, you say, okay, let the governors now go and start talking to their legislators. If I'm not interested in the bill, I will ask my legislators, please kill it. Those who would want it, please make sure it survives. I think that shouldn't be the way it is. Already, the pronouncement by the National Economic Council has created suspicion in the entire bill. If I were Mr. President, the President can withdraw any bill at any stage, so long as it has not reached the final third reading and approval.
Yeah, but don't forget, sir, that when we talk about this country, we have 19 northern governors.
Yes.
19 northern governors is not exactly, it's not half of the NEC.
No.
They're majority of the NEC. I assume that when decisions are taken in NEC, they are put to vote. I don't think, for my 8 years in the National Economic Council, there was no time when we had to go into vote. We're all responsible people. At that level, I don't think issues has ever gotten to the point of voting. So they never put anything to vote?
No, we never did. To the best of my knowledge, for 8 years in the National Economic Council, we've never voted.
The point I'm trying
it is always a consensus understanding. The position of the National Economic Council. And that is exactly where the fear is. Even if it were so, for that same reason of voting against whatever, for that same reason, why the president ought to have invited all of them. So all the experts.
It is interesting.
The question of the quarrel.
It is interesting. I mean, I think it will be up to the president and his advisors, because some people will say that is still not something that has been ruled out, that the president meeting with the governors, certainly. But when I spoke with this gentleman, behind the scenes, I asked him, how did your presentation go? And he said, were you surprised? Because he did tell me about the presentation he was making at NEC 2 weeks before. So I asked him, how did that go? And how come, the resolution was still withdrawal? And he said he himself was shocked, because after he made his presentation with the governors, there was a loud round of applause. There was a loud round. As a matter of fact, when he was speaking with me in the interview, he did say that what he thought they were going to get as members of that tax reform committee was commendation. That he thought they were going to be, praised for their ingenuity for what they had done.
One typical thing is that if you get carried away by the applaud, even if you talk rubbish, in the end, people will say, good.
Is that what happens?
No.
I'm just
drawing your attention to the fact that he was carried away by the applauding after his presentation. The applauding does not mean all what you have said has been accepted. All I'm saying is that, unfortunately, it is the procedure. I have no problem with all the details, the technical issue, as the gentleman in charge has said, states are even going to be benefiting more. So it is the understanding, even if the governors understand, even if his advisors understand, and the general public and the legislators do not understand, we are still having a problem. So I think the procedure seemed to give an impression that the president has disregarded the position of the governors, and it's not in the interest of our collective responsibilities are running the country.
Yeah, but the governors themselves, let's look at this. If they had a problem with this, because the procedure normally is the president has something to do. From what we understand, even the statement of the president said that the tax reform committee had engaged far and wide, had engaged with stakeholders, had engaged with what they call that now, had engaged with the private sector, which is where a lot of these taxes will be coming from, had engaged extensively.
Which was
so if the governors had a problem and felt that they had not been carried along, was it right for them to have first of all met as northern governors first and then hold a press conference? Weren't they putting the president on the spot and tying his hands behind his back and forcing him to do something when they know that the bill had already gone to the National Assembly?
I quite agree that was also part of the wrong procedure. I faulted that position. They wouldn't have done that. If I were there, I would have insisted, look, let's not go onto the street. If we discuss and this is our understanding, let's get to Mr. President. And I'm sure Mr. President will always be listening to them. And more so, worse still, the General Council involving all the governors met and the same position was proposed. I think this is...
Yeah, but at that point, some people said that was a fait accompli.
Well, I think the position we have now is what you call the damage control procedure, because the general understanding is that even truth, if you say it at the wrong time, to the wrong people, with the wrong approach, then you have already lost the credibility of the truth. So I am not quarreling with the content of the bill, and I'm sure from the explanation, as you said, given by the chairman of the tax reform, it's quite clear. But it is the procedure. Unfortunately, the suspicion has already been created. I only pray the National Assembly will do the needful, and a lot of understanding and lobbying, that's the assembly language, will be done by the presidency to explain all of these things and reach out to the Governors Forum as well.
All right, let's equally get your perspective on this new information and alert, actually, and I was raised by the army about security in the Northwest region. They're warning the country, saying, look, in this new terror group operating within that Kebbi Sokoto axis. And I do remember, I think the former governor of Kaduna State, he tried to rally his colleagues to see how they can pull together to ensure they address that headlong. But it appears as though this is defying a lot of things. How come a new terror group, a good thing that's been spotted though, but give us your impression about why you think this appears to be the case. I don't, maybe not intractable.
I think unfortunately, Chamberlain, this is giving us an impression that our intelligence gathering is still below average. Because if the intelligence had been up and doing from all the agencies, then this thing would have been discovered much, much earlier than now. I think the new insurgents, what do they call them? Is it
Shekarau or something?
Kularawa or whatever.
Yeah.
And they've already started attacking communities, giving them all kinds of nightmares, collecting levies and so on. I think we've had enough of the insurgents that we are battling with for them to have come in, and we understand they are coming in from the neighboring countries. From Niger, what I hear that they come in from Niger, from the borders of Sokoto, Kebbi, and they hit our own kind of. I think we need to do a lot of what people always say, restructuring of the architecture of the security.
So you've been a governor. So what would you have done differently to address this?
Well, my immediate thing, one, I always meet with the security committee every month, and I directed all the local governments by the end of every month. In fact, to tie it down to make sure the meetings hold, we fixed the last Thursday of every month. The state security committee will meet, the local government security committee will meet, and they report back, whatever. And I'm surprised as well that, you see, as a governor, every morning I receive security brief from the DSS. And if as a governor I'm receiving this, I'm sure Mr. President will be receiving similar daily briefing from all the security agencies.
But if I could jump in, do you agree with those who say, look, no matter what security agencies do, if poverty is not addressed in any part of the country, it will be a problem. This is where the governors come in here.
No, certainly the issue of poverty is largely part of it. But I still believe, I explained the other time I came, I am advocating for this same community policing that I've been agitating all over the place. These insurgents, the immediate people that see them and know where they're coming from are the villagers themselves. if you don't coordinate them in terms of community watch, in terms of guiding them and training them how to do all this intelligence gathering, if they hit a village, the villagers will wait to take a phone and call the local government headquarters or the state headquarters before the police respond. These people have done their damages and gotten away. So I think what we require really, issue of poverty is a long-term issue. Certainly the governments, both at local government and at state level, have a lot of responsibility. And in fact, it's one of the issues the League is trying to address, that we must insist the governments at the state and the local government do the right thing in terms of prioritization of people-oriented programs, people-oriented projects. We're going to do the bogus thing, as I mentioned the other time, when you build flyovers of billions of naira. How many people have cars to fly all the flyovers? When people are looking for the best things to do, basic health care, good school environment, and the like. So I think I quite agree. The state governments and the local governments have this very serious challenge, and poverty is part of the problem. But I still believe that if governments will initiate proper community intelligence gathering, we have done that. It's practical. I've said it a number of times. We did with the Hisbagat, the community. We set up a consultative forum about 12 in every ward. And they selected those who will be doing the intelligence gathering, and there was peace. In fact, up to today, ask any average man in Kano, the people trust this arrangement far more. The local, the traditional institution was greatly involved. We gave them responsibilities. We empowered them. I made sure every local government bought a very big jeep for its local government district head, so they will be able to be moving around. And with that, the Emir of Kano made it mandatory on all district heads to every week make a report.
How were they fueling the vehicle?
The local government was funding it. I'm sure you know I gave my local government on share of their funds, so they were fueling them, they were maintaining them, they were funding the committees, they were funding the community policing, all of this. They were doing it. And there was peace. And the report kept coming in, and before you know it, at the state level, we are aware the Security Council or the Security Committee in the state will handle it. So I think one of the major things to do is to improve the issue of intelligence gathering. Unfortunately, the number of the police, the army, the military is not enough for them to be all over the place. But if the state government coordinates it, as we did when we established the Hisbagas in Kano, we invited the police, we invited the military to train them. For 1 year, we were training them, giving them the basic rudiments of how to gather intelligence and report back. And they were doing it effectively. They were not carrying even a stick, not to talk of carrying any weapons, of guns or whatever. And people trusted them, and they were sharing the information with them. Through intelligence gathering, you will be able to identify informants who are working with the insurgents. But if the villagers are not guided to form a very coordinated reporting system, I've seen some governors out of anger, they will be saying, please let people go and defend themselves. How will they defend themselves? Have you organized them how to defend themselves? That was very outrageous and very unfortunate. So I think if we really want to address this issue, number one thing is government, both federal and state, must work together to improve intelligence gathering through community watch, through community policing. And up till now, we are not able to implement some of these things. There has been a lot of documents, we produce a lot of papers and guidance, and we've done it.
Just quickly, I mean, I know how passionate you feel about the issue of security, but let me quickly ask you this one as a wrap-up, what you make of the reversal of the age limit for tertiary institutions.
Well, see, it's very unfortunate. You see, immediately the minister made the pronouncement, that was the former minister, I came out and explained. It is part of the national policy on education. I'm surprised. The new minister made it his first assignment to revert it. He probably didn't consult the professionals, didn't look at the national policy on education. You see, what we don't seem to understand and know is that every curriculum from primary up to the university is prepared with the age in mind. This does not mean there aren't exceptions in every field. You can get a 13, 14-year child who can go and perform into the university. We've had 10-year child, 10-year-old child performing. But you always look at the majority. So I am surprised, and it's most unfortunate if this is becoming an issue. It's already part and parcel of the national policy on education, right from the time we were on to 7 years. I attended 7-year primary education, 5 years secondary school, 2 years in the higher school certificate, the HSC, and then 3 years in the university. By the time you add all of this, you're getting to 18. The age of getting to the primary school officially should have been 6 years. Of course, many got to school by 5 years. That does not mean you will abandon the curriculum. The curriculum, as we all know, ask anybody who is versed in curriculum development, we take the age into consideration. That does not mean a 16-year-old going to the university will not perform. No. What we want is proper education. To get proper education, it's not passing examination that is education and getting the certificate. No. To be a properly educated person, go through the syllabus, go through the curriculum. And the curriculum talks about the age issue. I'm surprised, really, this trivial issue of national policy will be reduced to, people are saying the minister was removed. I don't know how true it is because of this age thing. And the new one that came, probably capitalizing on that grandstanding, that I have reversed it to 16.
I guess we're still going to, we've not heard the last of this matter then.
No, some of us will really reach out to them. I assure you.
We'll look forward to their response after you do reach out. We'll have to anchor at that point. Senator Ibrahim Shekarau, Chairman, League of Northern Democrats and former Minister of Education himself, a former governor of Kano State. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much, Hamlin. It's a pleasure being here.
All right, Business Morning comes up now.
Hello and welcome to the start of the trading week. As the trading week after Donald Trump's win in the U.S., and definitely we know markets have been quite dramatic, but we're looking at markets and the global space now, starting with our biggest foreign exchange earner, oil. We see oil prices continue to slide today as a threat of a supply disruption from a U.S. storm that diminished, and after China's stimulus measures failed to meet investor expectations for stronger fuel demand growth in the world. Remember, China, once China sneezes in that oil market, all the markets catch a cold. $73.56 a barrel, down 0.4%. That's for Brent, and we see WTI, that's the U.S. grade. That's the one the Dangote refinery likes to import there, $70 a barrel. So we're seeing lower oil prices now, but would that translate to lower PMS prices? That's the question. Well, the stimulus package unveiled by Beijing at the National People's Congress Standing Committee meeting on Friday, that failed to meet market hopes for a boost to economic activity and energy consumption. So we'll see if we'll have a positive or a negative week for oil prices. But we know if oil prices go down, that's a negative. For earnings, that's for the government. But it should be a positive for PMS and fuel prices. Anyway, let's look at the FX market now. See, the market opened quietly at the NAFEM window on Friday with a broad bid-ask spread as the day unfolded. But we saw that supply of US dollars, that actually improved on Friday, according to traders. Despite this, the Naira weakened by about 39 Naira, 37. Copper to drop 2.40%. That was the close for Friday. 1,678 Naira, still holding that range of 1,006 to 1,650. That's at the official window. For the NAFEX rate, it saw a slight gain, appreciating by about 4 Naira, 90 Kobo to settle at 1,673 Naira to the dollar. Looking ahead this week, traders expect mixed market sentiment in the trading sessions. So it's basically what we saw last week. So another weakening for Friday. We'll see how the market close today. All right, let's look at other matters now. Bilateral trade between Nigeria and China, that surged to a record $15.1 billion. That's That's about 25 trillion naira from January to September 2024, marking a 36.1% year-on-year increase in China imports from Nigeria. This was made known by the Acting Consul General of China, Mr. Jamie Yu, during the celebration of arrival of the first vessel on COSCO's new route to Lekki Port. He also shared that by September, Lekki Port's cargo throughput for 2024 had surpassed 160,000 20-foot equivalent units. Mr. Jin emphasized that the growth of trade between China and Nigeria depends on continued collaboration, expressed the Chinese government's desire for multinational enterprises to work together to enhance trade, develop modern ports and logistics infrastructure in Nigeria, and facilitate greater access to the expansive Chinese market, ultimately fostering shared development benefits. And we see Bolt, a leading ride-hailing platform, has announced a significant commitment of 100 million euros over the next 3 years to bolster safety measures on its platform. This investment will support Bolt's safety team in its critical work of product development, customer support, safety feature awareness, and preventive measures to minimize safety incidents. The announcement was made during a global safety campaign launch event held in Lagos. Take a listen.
This event brought together key players from the Lagos State Ministry of Transportation, representatives from the Federal Road Safety Corps, vehicle inspection officers, safety experts, Bolt's representative, and members of the media.
To be joining them on the top table.
The Bolt's regional manager for North and West Africa set the ball rolling in her opening remarks, where she says safety remains a priority for the ride-hailing company.
It's a major priority area for us, which is why we've invested resources, huge resources, to be sure that safety remains a priority and we minimize incidents to as close to zero as much as possible.
In his keynote address, the Director, Lagos State Ministry of Transport, Mr. Olasukomi, speaks on leveraging technology in the provision of efficient transport system for the citizens.
Through the Ministry of Transportation, the Lagos State government has partnered with all registered e-hailing companies, including Bolt, the organizer of today's event, to enhance public safety. The mission of Lagos State Transportation is to create Africa's model mega city, a global economic and financial hub that is safe, secure, functional, and productive.
Bolt says its safety team of over 500 specialists from across the world will focus on their efforts on product development, support, and scaling preventive measures.
For instance, if the ride is not stationary for a long period of time, somebody reaches out to you to find out if everything is going okay. And if something is wrong at that point, you have the opportunity to get help.
I commend Bolt Nigeria for prioritizing safety and for leading with integrity and care. Together, let us keep moving forward towards a future where every trip on our roads is a secure journey for every citizen.
For the management of Bolt Nigeria, the company will remain focused on delivering safety ways of commuting for riders.
Safety is not a today matter for us at Bolt. It's been at the very beginning of our efforts to be sure that riders and drivers complete rides successfully.
With regulatory stakeholders, it's always an ongoing conversation. It's always something that we keep building and developing. But so far, it's been fantastic working with the government and building safety features with them.
Bolt, the global shared mobility platform providing ride-hailing and car rental services in over 600 cities across 50 countries, is optimistic that the launch of this new safety campaign will put it on a new pedestal to deliver better services.
Thank you.
All right, now to our first conversation. Most listed companies have released their results to the public from third quarter to 9 months result for the year. I've seen, bumper revenues in some financial reports showing growth compared to the previous period. But today we'll be looking at results from Nigeria's manufacturing sector. Our focus is on return on equity. That's the ROE for most of these companies. ROE is a measure of the profitability of a business in relation to its equity. That's for every naira and dollar invested there by shareholders, how the business is able to make money from that. Well, let's look at, we'll be looking at some data. But joining us to discuss this is a manufacturer, Mr. George Onofu, who's the MD, CEO Coleman Wise and Cable, join me right here in the studio. Great to have you.
Good to be here, laddie.
Yeah, so as I said, we have data. And from some of the listed companies, we see Nigeria Breweries ROE for the 9 months in 2024, 173% down. Cadbury Nigeria PLC, 34.30% down. But we see the cement giants able to eke up gains, 12% for Dangote Cement. Boa Cement added about 13.35%. Yeah, and I did see that headline earlier today about cement prices, going up. So I guess that's, looking good for the cement, manufacturers. But talk to me about the importance of ROE and, what this metric says about the health of a company.
Now, you spoke to the point earlier today, basically talking about the invested amount in capital vis-a-vis the profitability of that business. It's very simple and well explained. But what jumps at you on these 4 companies? Just by looking at it, negative, negative, positive, positive. What would jump at you? FX, local, local. It's the first thing that should jump at you.
Right.
If you look at where the actual cost goes into, this is quite highly import dependent, these 2 companies. This is highly local dependent in terms of raw materials. The positive will come out because they are not as highly dependent on import as these 2 are. So the majority of the losses here came out from the FX losses. The upside here is companies literally that are majorly dependent on local resources. So you actually, the first 2 eye-catching thing that you actually should look at is where is their cost of funds coming from?
Right.
Now, that shows majority of the people or companies that are dependent on importation will all be showing ROEs of negatives, which is their capital, because their losses that would have been generated from FX-related losses would be differential, because these guys here are not literally importing as much. So their FX-related losses will be a lot smaller. This will be large. So if you look at most companies that are related to that, they're showing massive negatives on FX-related losses, and that literally has dropped their profitability, if not in cases, put them in negative. Some has literally wiped off their total capital base and even their positions, talking PZ, Cousins, and the rest of them, which had to show a global indication of what Nigerian impact is to its end result game. And so when you look at those 2, it tells you, look, if you're a company that has heavy dependence on raw materials local, you most likely will see a contraction, but not in the same level of these other companies. Now, so that will give the indications to the market where we should all be looking at. Everybody that is 60, 70, 80% raw material dependent on FX is massively exposed to a FX-related loss, which at the end of the day, their bottom line will come down. It will contract drastically. Now, companies that are locally based raw materials would have a contraction, but the contraction will be dependent on the small amount of maybe 20, 30% that is their FX-related exposure and risk. So it's a fantastic display, but it just tells us where we're going. So you actually know where your contractions are coming from, and invariably it tells the government, look, where the problem is. Now, if you look at this, and these are also not small employers of labor or manufacturing in sector. Now, this begs to ask the question, why, if you speak to others in other countries, it's shocking when you actually come into Nigeria and you find that raw materials, we're paying duty on it. For what reason, I don't know. The whole point sometimes is to backward integrate. But when you don't have it, you should turn your country into a processing country. Now, Nigerian breweries, Cadbury's have export potential of the same products they're making in Nigeria. They don't have to build the same factory in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Benin, in every West Africa. I can turn your country into the hub of supply. The same way Nigeria lost some of its shares of industry to Ghana at a point where everybody was moving their factories to Ghana, because there's ETLS, which is ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, that allows me to duty-free export back into your country. There's nothing you can do about it. We agreed to that trade agreement. So I can do that also. Now, but what would increase this type or reduce the figures is to actually change the dynamics of fiscal policy, to encourage raw material. The same way we actually, if you look at the impact that the government looked at on food and related agricultural products, and introduced a 150 days window of zero import duty. I'm sorry, the question is, if we don't want this to keep going negative, we need to actually put the exposure down, reduce the exposure risk, not only on the FX, also on the raw material, so that these guys are competitive. The reality of life is, if we take our FX position of devaluation today, reduce it, you automatically reduce inflation. So if I take out 5 or 10 or 20% duty on these guys, they reduce their price, I automatically bring down food inflation, drinks, and because these are guys making food. Now, for these guys, it's a different ballgame entirely. Now, when I come here, it's a case of, yes, they're going to still continue to make profit. Because, look, let's be sincere. These guys are producing elastic. There's elasticity in their product. No matter what price they call cement, a lot of us are going to buy. The question is, how competitive is that market? So the direction for government will be different here. Should be, how do I enable more players, as many as possible, right? So that this really becomes competitive. Because we all scream and say cement price is going up. I really cannot understand the argument.
Because we've seen the prices of even how that's impacted. And if you go to,
if you actually look, good thing is these are traded companies, so you can actually see their bottom lines. Their bottom lines are still going up, although not as much as they expect it to, because yes, cost of funds have gone up, financing cost has gone up. That is why you're seeing that marginal increase. Otherwise, they'll be showing a bigger figure on RAE.
To the upside.
Correct, to the upside. That's the reality. So, but they keep making the argument that they have import, okay, for machinery, we have to be fair on them. They do have some certain amount of import. But in terms of the increases, if you do a comparative analysis between our products and products elsewhere, it should have some differential, but not too much. So we need to actually encourage manufacturers more in certain sectors, and now look at other sectors in terms of food, raw material availability, how those sectors can create. So in everything, I always say, look, you need to have a balance between the monetary and the fiscal. Now, this is a fiscal issue. It's not a monetary issue, because if you throw money at it, it's not going to solve the problem. But if I throw some fiscal policy immediately on it and allow Cadbury, Nigerian breweries, and some of these other players to actually reduce their cost of durables, I will instantly get their costs down, and they can be a bit more competitive, and they drive their own prices down because they relate more to food and drinks. So it's all about, and when you look at our inflationary figures, the headline figures that have been literally bombarded over the years now in the last 2-3 years has been food related. So anything that I can bring down on that area will bring down my total cost and actually improve this guy's negative.
And it's quite interesting, you know, from the solutions you prefer for these parts and this part, I don't hear anything about rate hikes, which is great. But we'll take a break now. When we come back, we're going to analyze the impact of, you know, the rate hikes we've had, you know, so far. We'll continue the conversation right after this break. Just stay with us.
It's Konga Yakata, our biggest sale of the year. Every day till November 30th is Black Friday. Shop genuine computing, Starlink kits, electronics, mobile phones, and many more at up to 85% off. Powered by the original manufacturers. It is cheap and safe at Konga, the e-commerce group you trust.
Welcome back, and we're still analyzing results of manufacturers in Nigeria. I still have with me Mr. George Onofo. There's a MD CEO, Coleman Wires and Cables. Thank you so much. And, you know, all that you brought up about those companies, eye-opener, you know, definitely. But I'm still thinking back to fuel subsidy is gone and, you know, collapsing the FX market, allowed the Naira to float at this time. I'm wondering, do you think our economic managers and this government actually, you know, foresaw the impact of floating the Naira? Because we keep hearing the same tune when you want to look at the financial results of most of these companies. FX losses, FX losses, FX losses. Do you think the government actually saw this coming? And for salary earners and, you know, us being an import-dependent country, did they see the impact of somebody that used to earn about 350,000 naira? It was equivalent to about $1,000, you know, at some point. But that 350K is not $1,000 right now. Do you think they saw this coming?
It's a fair question. Now, luckily, I'm not a politician, so I'm going to actually answer it truthfully. One, I believe they saw it coming. Two, they erroneously started wrongly. Now, let me explain that. Everybody knew, because if you look at their campaigns prior, all the campaigners literally said the same thing. We're going to remove fuel subsidy, we're going to harmonize the FX-related situation. Now, the question is, nobody was doubting that that was a necessity. The question is, how do you implement it? It was the implementation they got horribly wrong. They started too early. They did not. Normally, you would have expected them to have gotten into government and started the easing over time. Now, unfortunately, the May 29th speech literally caught everybody off guard, right? And with all good intention, I think, from the president. But that statement became a fiat. The next day, everybody went to the pumps, literally trying to pull out as much. The system could not cope. So automatically, what happened the next day? Prices were jacked up because they didn't have the resources. You know, Nigerians were literally positioned ourselves. Someone has just told you that the fuel subsidy has stopped. You don't need to want to know what the final price is. You just rush to the petrol station and buy the fuel at that price. So that's what literally happened. Everybody in Nigeria went to the petrol station the next day. Not that they planned for it, not that the government was ready for it. It was just literally a statement, which for me, I think the president was trying to say, this is what I expect to happen. Now, but they left the part that Nigerians are literally forward thinkers. And they would rather save the money today and chop the gari now and literally eat well tomorrow. So that's what happened. Now, the aftermath of that was, now what do we do? And those are the implementation that literally has taken more time than it should. They're getting there now. Let's be fair on them. But we've literally lost over a year to what they were prepared for, but not timed prepared for. Now, so that has failed. Now, invariably, what you then had was an impromptu decision that literally led to an increase in inflation because, boom, you went from 160-something, bang, to 600 now. Then you had an FX Naira that went from 400, of course, fake 400, now to the real, from about 600 and something. Now we've got to 1,700 plus. Now, Nigeria moves easily on FX-related devaluation. Naira, literally, inflation will be impacted. If we get Naira back to 1,000, believe me, inflation will drop almost 10 basis points. All of us know that. So how do we look at it? So the first thing was stabilization, which took longer than expected. Now, stabilization has started happening in terms of monetary policy. I think we're in the right direction of monetary policy. On fiscal policy, we're now coming in line. Now, I'm optimistic. Unfortunately, the two impacts have ended up with increase in interest rates to try and also deflate the inflationary effect of an increase in inflation to try and calm it down. Now, you push interest rate up, the knock-on effect is onto the manufacturers and the whole sector, cost of fund to everybody. If you look at everybody's books in the last 1 year, financing costs are shot up, cost of sales have shot up because everything has increased in price. At the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about that. For most manufacturers, it's a disaster period because they're just literally having to either scale down or scale down their actual production capacity and capacity utilization. In Nigeria, as the country has dropped, that's basically sees, if you look at the today, the Purchasing Managers Index, you're now down to 46.9% from 49.9%. The mere fact that we're even below 50 should be worrisome because it's contraction. Normally, at a PMI index, you don't really want to be below 50. You want to be above 50. But today we're now below 50. And we're contracting.
And that's the biggest drop. If you can put that up for me, that's a PMI for October, the Purchasing Managers Index there. We see that 46.9 points October from 49.8. And 49.8 was really close to 50.
Yeah.
But that's a big drop.
It's a big drop.
For October. And when I look deeper, into, what Stanbic there had to say about the PMI, I saw most of these companies had to employ more.
Yes. And
at the same time, they had to also increase salaries.
Everybody did.
And definitely that's, adding into input costs.
Correct.
At this point, which will now drive out, drive up the selling price.
So because you see, the reality of this, what is this PMI study? Basically, your production, your employment, your purchasing, literally all costs related to your supply chain. Now, if all that goes up, there's no way this will not come down. So it's an average survey of all the supply chain elements that creates this figure. Now, in literary terms, it means when you get my cost of employing labor has gone up. My cost to production has gone up. My cost to supply chain has gone up. Now, by the time I take that and take the average, this as contractor, I'm buying less because those costs has gone up. Now, the contraction meaning that, and the disadvantage of this is literally it's telling the market where we're going. So now for anybody in the system today, in the structure, will be literally making their decision based on a contraction. Now, I will spend less. I will borrow less. Because now I'm seeing the market that I'm dealing with, my supply chain is contracted. So invariably it means the market is not growing. Now, fact is everybody from January or even end of last year has increased wage bills. Now, if you're increasing numbers, yes, we're beginning to go back to a little bit of normalcy in terms of employment. We're beginning to increase. As I said, there's a bit of rebalancing going on, but it hasn't taken off the problem. But it will take time. And that's sometimes where my own optimism, never look at Nigeria today. Look at all the figures and look at Nigeria tomorrow. You will most likely have a better answer than looking at today. We most of the time look at today. In my own view, and this is a personal view, so let me know, this would eventually go back up. But it is not today. It is not even Q1 of next year. It's not Q2. I see it more as we get into a better figure by Q4 of next year and start looking at 2026. Now, the question is, how do I position my business for the next 1 year before I see proper growth in the country? And I think it eventually would happen because if you look at it, on the FX-related side, we're seeing harmonization. On the interest rate side, we're seeing a cooling down. There's no reason, really, for me, after this, I don't see any reason why CBN should be increasing any interest. Because the market literally...
We have another meeting this month.
I can see...
Consensus is... It's
a
hold.
It's a hold. The whole market in the world has started dropping. Nigeria cannot go up anymore. But there's also an advantage to us, really. When you look at it, an high interest rate, literally, if the Fed, which is coming down now, the Bank of England has come down 25 basis points, 0.25. ECB is going to come down. The thing is that the way the market trends is that the more they come down, everybody moves out investment into higher yield areas.
So that's the carry trade, right?
Right. So the carry trade for us is that in Nigeria, we expect to see more investment from a cooling down in those areas to higher yield countries like ours, which is literally guaranteed. Now, but it says it's placed to the people that have liquidity. Now, if I'm not a manufacturer that doesn't have the liquidity, I'll be crying. If you're a guy that has liquidity, you'll be smiling because you'll be trading up your money, irrespective. Interest rate is high. You have deposit rates well in excess in the 20s. You have FGM bonds and monetary bonds in 28, 27. These are money markets that have fantastic returns. Even if you take off the negative position, I tell people, I say, look, the reality is Nigeria looks more like a savings country, a treasury management country today than anything else. Because for most banks, I don't see them borrowing. Because when you look at the risk, and this is the sad part, The manufacturers need money. But let me be frank with you. The reality is the commercial banks are not lending.
Right, and we've seen CRR, increase about 50% at this point. But just to coast home, now we're running out of time. Is it time for us to say, for our economic manager to say, you know what, let's peg the Naira at this price, at this point, while we're making every other thing work?
I am not...
And defend it with all we have.
I am not a supporter of that. Okay. Because if you peg the Naira, you're going to put a run on your reserves. You put a run on your reserve, we're back to square one. Now, the only thing I think that we should do immediately is peg on certain fiscal policies. I'll peg the Naira against every import. And also, I'll look at those guys that are actually producing and creating wealth and creating employment and see how I can use fiscal policy to actually drive down their own cost also. Pegging the Naira will take us in a circle that we've always been, which is run down our reserves against it, run into zero, go back to the same problem in another 3-4 years. I don't think I think what they're doing...
We've seen our reserves rising.
Look, what you should watch, personally, I think what the market should watch that reserve over the next 1 year. These guys are building up a war chest. My own war chest calculation says 2026. They've got a power float. And at that power float, they can do what you want. So the question is, watch the market. And I think the CBN governor is actually playing that game now. He's letting the Naira slide, but he's increasing his reserve. Look, if you want to develop the Naira, you need a float and you need a war chest. It is not a war chest at 40 billion. It's a war chest at about 50 to 60 billion. At that point, see what that guy can do. And it would be achieved, well, it will take him to almost the end of 2026. He brings out that war chest, he will defend the Naira at whatever he likes. That's the time you'll see this man be able to drive that Naira down below 1,000. But that action cannot happen to 2026 ending. But Q3, Q4, 2026, it will have built up that war chest. That is what the market should keep watching. Keep watching that war chest. When it happens, I'll be in the money because I am playing the Naira game. I believe hold your Naira, wait till 2026.
Right.
You'll smile.
Hold your Naira.
Hold your Naira.
All right, so, definitely quite incredible times, and we have festivities, coming up. So what kind of conversations, are you having, in your industry to kind of make some kind of, buffer for the consumer at this point?
Really?
Somehow,
I think the buffer we should all be begging for is buffer from the government that trickles down to everybody. Because we as a manufacturing sector are already creating the buffer, really. And what I mean by the buffer is, if you look at minimum wage today, I don't see no manufacturer in Nigeria that has not been above minimum wage since end of last year. Now, we still having governors struggling with what they even want to pay for minimum wage. So we can't say, look, you can't put the private sector in the total burden of a state. The state needs to do something. And if they are struggling, then they should then use that same private sector to create the buffer. Ease the business and the life and the livelihood of the industry, and you will get the buffer guaranteed by December. They just need to do something to actually ease the burden on the manufacturing sector, and the growth of the manufacturing sector will take the burden away from them.
Right, so it starts from up there, then, we have the manufacturers, and we now have some kind of buffer for the consumers with that kind of flow.
That will be the direction.
Definitely. What are you seeing in 2025?
2025, I still see the Naira close to plus or minus 3-4% of where we are. I don't see a massive position of that. I see the position of growth. We will still maintain same similarity in GDP growth, maybe plus another maybe 200-300 basis points, moving it up slightly. I think what everybody will be looking for in 2025 will be stability, and I think that's what the government is also going to be looking for. So for me, play stable, play the market stable, borrow wisely, and you will get through 2025. The aim is 2026 to see the upside.
The upside, 2026. I'm as optimistic as you, Mr. George Onofogo, MD, CEO, Coleman Wires and Cables. Always great having your perspective right here on Business Morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so definitely it's the start of another trading week right here in Lagos, Nigeria. But let's get a check on how the markets performed. That was last week. That's talking about the local bourse, looking at the NGX and most of the sectors that we track there. We see 0.37%. That's for the stock market, 96,924 points. That was Friday's trade, actually. Volume 78% up, 744 million units valued at 16.47. But, you know, it's a brand new week, and we're all going to be looking out for data. That's inflation numbers for last month. We're going to be getting that data out from the National Bureau of Statistics. We're seeing if it's going to be another rise, and also our eyes on the food inflation data. We'll see how that, you know, drives investor sentiment. And for the last rate-setting meeting for this year, that's for the MPC, CBN MPC, we'll see how all of that data is going to impact that going forward. That's the show today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. I hand things over to the Sunrise Daily team.
I imagine there was one.
Back, the NEC of Nigeria Labour Congress had an emergency meeting yesterday, and so that is part of what we're going to focus on this morning. Mr. Mecha Suguni joins us now. He's the former deputy president of NLC. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. So just a quick one. We've seen that release from NEC, Labour's NEC, in terms of state of the economy and worsening economic situation and some of the resolutions and recommendations there. They talk about how they wanted the government to come up with a wide range of economic solutions and policies. But many would always say, look, we've been through this road before. Labour has come up with this kind of narrative before. But what is not exactly clear to people is what this means in terms of Labour's next steps about these matters.
Yeah, good morning, Chamberlain. If we are truly referring to the NEC press release as regards the minimum wage non-implementation by some states, is that where we're paying attention strictly? So we need to understand that labor matters are indeed not far from each other when we refer to the history of his narrative. And that is to say, when people say, we've heard this before, they are right, because labor has always been engaged in negotiation year in, year out, both at the private sector level and public sector. Whether we like it or not, by 2 years or so to come, another negotiation will still be in place, and this similar directive or effort to implement minimum wage will also be enforced. This is part of NLC obligation to ensuring that agreement put in place and not just papers on the table, but to materialize to benefit the workers. And that can only yield result when you enforce the implementation. What they have done so far is to carry out its constitutional duty to enforce state implementation of minimum wage. We all know that some governors, even before now, have cried that 30,000 was much to pay. Then now that minimum wage is 70,000, you need to push harder to enforce those states to comply to the law. Unfortunately, without push, they may not be compliant. And then NLC must be pushed to push. And that is the pressure they are facing. So managing that pressure, they must issue directive. That's what I think the National Executive Council had done in compliance with the rules of engagement.
How many states do you envisage, or how many states do you have concrete information are currently in breach or are unwilling to pay the new minimum wage of 70,000 naira?
But for purposes of mentioning some state and leaving some unidentified, So it doesn't look like NLC is actually selective. I think I would make a package statement that there are states, notable states, that have gone above minimum wage, which we have seen. There are some that have also complied, which we have seen. There are some that are yet to make statements. They are even yet to meet with their state executive in order to adopt what has been agreed at the national level and define modality for implementation. So the interest here will be that what will NLC do to these states that have actually remained adamant to implementation?
Now the question is, how many of those states are currently in breach? How many of those states that you say have not even held a meeting, they have not made a statement, how many do you have of them in total?
Definitely that I need to check the record in order to be sure. I don't just want to quote and then possibly may miss the number.
Yeah, but at the last count, how many are you in the know of?
Why I'm skeptical about calling number here is because it's immaterial, whether it's one state, whether it's 10 states. What matters is what will NLC be doing to those states that have failed to implement the minimum wage. So that is why I'm paying attention to the action of proposed action of Congress towards those states. The number for now does not change the strategy.
I understand. I mean, I certainly understand the stance of NLC. It's always about injury to one is injury to all. And so for you, you know, as long as one state is affected, but this is just to give a general picture of the level of compliance. That's why I wanted to be able to measure. Do we have up to, say, 15 states that are in the breach, 16, 19, 20 that are unwilling to pay? That just to give an idea to Nigerians, you know, about the level of compliance that we're seeing. As you said, we have a number of states that notably have gone above what is the minimum wage and have set a new minimum in their own states. But just to have an idea of how many, but it doesn't appear you have that number now, do you?
Yeah, I don't have the number because some have not implemented, some have defined method to start implementation. Some are about to commence, and because of that, you may be concluding on a number that eventually today, some states may even kickstart implementation. So I want to be careful with the number, but I tell you, some states provocatively have refused to attend to minimum wage demand, and the NLC has also, in line with its obligation, called for this very directive. And I think those
you just said provocatively. I imagine that you're angry enough to mention their names, are you?
No. It's not.
You're not angry enough to mention, even though they're provoking you. Okay, then.
We're angry enough to propose the action needed to enforce the implementation.
Well, we're not going to know what state is implementation, because you have asked your workers to go on strike by a certain day in those states that have refused to implement the minimum wage. Isn't that correct?
Yes, NLC has issued such circular to members. And why they were in that blanket offer is because if NLC lists the name of state and upon release of that circular, they had gone ahead to implement, they will need to issue a new circular. And that's why you see NLC is directing that any state that has failed to. So it's now depending on the state ESCO of NLC to review the status quo at their state level. What is the position of the state as against the minimum wage? And where steps have not been taken to enforce implementation, proceed on the 1st of December to ensure that workers withdraw their service in order to draw strong attention and make every possible effort that the state think towards implementation of minimum wage as a priority of the state. Because we have always emphasized that most governors don't see salary of workers as a priority. Yet, on daily basis, they approve certain money for certain purposes, neglecting this very portion of their obligation as employers. Is also a very serious attempt. Negation to workers' effort to work is a threat to workers themselves. And we must do everything within the law to call them to order.
Your communique from the NEC meeting was very extensive. I'd like to take you up on this issue of petrol pricing. It's number 3 on the communique. Petrol pricing and the urgent need for activating public refineries. You talked about how you believe that the public can currently be, it does appear that the public is being ripped off with the current, by those who control the levers of economic power in Nigeria, which explains why the domestic public refineries may not be immediately allowed to come on stream. Now, what exactly would you say has given rise to this particular thinking, this thinking that there is inappropriate pricing of petrol locally as a result of the conflicts we've seen between the NNPC marketers, the Dangote refinery, etc.? What precisely would you say has happened to give rise to this notion?
The notion is born out of the inconsistency we have suffered over time as regards the management of and the schedule of both importation and the pricing release by NNPC. And if you watch what has happened, especially right from the time Dangote announced his readiness to commence disposition of the same product, we have been hearing, it comes like rumor, there's a counter pronouncement and all the rest. So NLC is of the opinion that the inability of government to have factor reasons to enable our local refineries to work, until that is done, this quagmire will continue because of there's no transparency in the accountability of what comes into the country and what is consumed by Nigerians. And such report can never be actual. And therefore, we are creating scarcity indirectly. We also ensure that we are paying subsidy. At the same time, the subsidy is paid for Nigerians and beyond, because the product is extending beyond this country. So a lot of abnormalities that are holding in Nigeria as regards PMS, both the product and the pricing, is such that the only way to checkmate, the only way to evaluate and ensure that the right thing is done is to make our local refineries work, so that from production to refine point, Nigerians will keep record of what is happening. This idea of exporting crude and what you are bringing in, you are the only one that knows what went out. You are the only one that will tell Nigerians what you have brought in. And at the end of the day, is figures we hear. We don't see volume. So you cannot trace the actual consumption to the source of importation. And they're taking advantage of the inability of Nigerians to access this record. What we normally hear is GMD of NNPC come on television or anywhere here to tell you we have spent so amount on this. The indices on how they spend this money and how they generate it is unknown to Nigerians, and that is where the corruption lies. So the refinery must work in order to cure this fear.
Well, we see that the NLC is equally commenting on the developments in rivers, but the court has ruled, so one wonders, what is NLC doing wading into rivers politics?
It may be on personal assumption and position. Don't forget, freedom of participation on issues allows individuals to express their view on any on any point, on any issue whatsoever. So if NLC, depending on the officer that have made his position on any matter, that does not change the position of law with regards to Rivers State issue.
So what's the point? What point are they trying to make? If the court has ruled, then the other party is supposed to appeal it, and since they've appealed, what's NLC's comment here? Because it matters little, because it is what the court decides that will eventually hold sway.
But it depends on the position of NLC that you're referring to. What did NLC say that calls for attention? What position of NLC are we actually referring to in this matter?
Well, you see here, NLC is asking that they are suggesting that the decision is going to deprive the people of Rivers of their revenue. And so that presupposes that the court was wrong in that instance. And everybody knows that, I mean, the NLC should know themselves. The processes, the legal processes has already kicked in. So commenting on this matter is tantamount to them being meddlesome in this case. Many will think that way.
As a person, as a consultant and expert in trade union, my position on that is for the fact that the matter is before the law will take its course, the wrong indeed will be made right. So anything that is before the court of law may not be subject for public discourse. Otherwise, one may be accused of intruding. So for me, NLC position there should be taken as a corporate view on a particular matter. Because even lawyers reserve right to make comment after judgment on any particular matter. And whatever that has been said there should be considered as their opinion in the judgment, and not necessarily asking to set aside the judgment of the court of law.
So as we wind down on this one, could you then tell us to be issuing these press release or press releases lately from the NLC, it gets people wondering, has NLC lost its steam? Because now petrol prices appear to be taking a life of their own now, and NLC, little or no impact. People don't seem to be looking to NLC as their savior anymore.
As a matter of fact, if I must speak to Nigerians, this issue is gone beyond organized labor. The issue at hand is about Nigerians' destiny. It's about the future of our children. It's about the integrity of Nigeria as a country. And the area will stop putting our trust and possibly relying on institution stake to be the stake of all. The earlier, the better, because don't forget, NLC has its members to protect, and it's only when these workers are affected in policy, they cry out, and when they are also when they are invited for a meeting and certain actions are taken to cushion the effect on workers, this same NLC, I believe, will have reason to accept government position on some issues. But if we're waiting for NLC alone to drive the affairs of Nigeria for the interest of the whole country, they may not meet up that obligation anytime soon. And therefore, Nigerians will begin to think of what we must do as a people. We have seen in other countries, it's not organized labor that lead them when they want to protest. When they want to say no to a particular policy or hardship, it is not NLC that drove the NSAS agenda in Nigeria. It was not NLC that led the bad governance agitation. I think when people think that a particular policy or action is affecting them, people must speak out, and by speaking out, they form unity that will eventually lead the people out. That kind of protest is what makes government to make revision. Otherwise, NLC is guided by constitution, they are guided by law, and anything they do has to be within the confine of their own jurisdiction. So I believe that the issue of price increase and the hardship we are facing now is a matter that goes beyond the fuel increment. How did we get here? Do you know that nobody is talking about the electronic voting system in Nigeria? How do we prevail on National Assembly to do that? There should be a separate protest in that regard to demand for instrument that will get us leaders that will be our leader. You can only be my leader when I participate in a system that brought you to power, gave Nigerians room to choose so. Look at what just happened in America. And the incumbent was fast to admit results.
So NLC is literally telling us now we're largely on our own to a large extent.
NLC has never been the one responsible for the failure we are facing. NLC has never been the one responsible for the failure that we are facing in Nigeria. NLC has always stood in trying to fight for their members. Indirectly, it also benefits ordinary Nigerians. So anytime they delay in taking certain steps, the ordinary Nigerian on the street will feel that NLC is not doing its best. Whereas NLC follows procedure to write letter to employers, make demand. NLC will not write to government about tomato. NLC will be telling them that workers' wage need to be increased. And don't forget, we have less than 20 million of Nigerians that are affiliated to Nigerian Labour Movement. That means if we're increasing salary of this 20 million, what about the 200 and something million left? Who will speak for them? So I tell you the NLC agenda, when they propose to go on strike, government reserve the right to invite them for a meeting, promise them benefit for decent workers, And then NLC also have the right at that time to call off the strike because members have gotten benefit.
All right.
This same benefit may not go to ordinary Nigerians. And
All
therefore,
right,
ordinary Nigerians must know that it is their own time to take their destiny in their hand and do so now.
All right, Comrade Amici Asuguni, former Deputy President of NLC, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Chamberlain and Co.
All right, so there you go.
So suddenly a new perspective, encouraging Nigerians to take their matters in their own hands and not wait for the NLC. I didn't see that response coming.
Well, I think it was just a matter of when, not if, because many had thought there was always going to be a limit. So is NLC helpless now? Who knows? All right, there you go. That wraps it up today. We do thank you all for your time. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
Oh, we wish you a very productive Monday and week. Thank you for watching. I'm Mao Yusuf. See you soon.